I spent 18 months cleaning his mansion in complete anonymity, invisible to everyone who mattered, until the morning I discovered the surveillance footage with my name written across every file. What I found in those recordings would expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate power and reveal that my presence at Blackwood Estate had never been coincidental. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning that started like every other morning in my cramped studio apartment above Chen's Market in downtown Portland. I had been surviving on instant coffee and day-old pastries for 3 weeks, counting every dollar until my next housekeeping paycheck arrived. The envelope bore the elegant letterhead of Meridian Employment Services, and my hands trembled as I opened it, expecting another rejection. Instead, I found an opportunity that seemed too extraordinary to be real. Dear Miss Alexandra Torres. The letter began in crisp professional typography. We are pleased to offer you a position as residential maintenance staff at a private estate in the Columbia River Gorge. The compensation package includes housing, meals, and a monthly salary of $8,000. The position requires discretion, reliability, and the ability to maintain complete confidentiality regarding all aspects of the household operations. $8,000 monthly represented more money than I had ever earned in my life. The figure seemed so substantial that I read it multiple times, convinced that I had misunderstood the decimal placement. After graduating from Portland State University, with a degree in social work and accumulating $37,000 in student loan debt, I had spent 14 months applying for positions in my field without success. The economic recession had eliminated most entry-level social services positions, leaving me competing with experienced professionals for the few remaining opportunities. My savings had evaporated 6 months earlier when my mother required emergency surgery that her insurance declined to cover. I had exhausted my credit cards, borrowed against my car, and taken on 3 part-time jobs to manage the medical bills and my own basic survival. The housekeeping work paid minimum wage and offered no benefits, but it provided just enough income to prevent complete financial collapse. The letter continued with specific instructions for the interview process. I was to report to the Meridian Employment Services office the following morning, at precisely 9 o'clock, bringing identification documents and 3 professional references. The tone suggested that this opportunity would not remain available indefinitely, and candidates who demonstrated serious interest would be prioritized accordingly. I spent the remainder of that Tuesday researching Meridian Employment Services and discovering virtually nothing substantial about their operation. Their website contained minimal information beyond basic contact details, and a brief statement about providing discreet staffing solutions for discerning clients. No client testimonials, no detailed service descriptions, no photographs of their facilities or staff members. The lack of transparency seemed unusual for a legitimate employment agency, but my desperate financial circumstances overrode my natural caution. That evening, I called my mother to discuss the opportunity. Maria Torres had immigrated from Guatemala 30 years earlier and built a successful small business providing housekeeping services to affluent families throughout Portland's West Hills neighborhood. Her perspective on domestic employment carried the wisdom of 3 decades, navigating the complex dynamics between service workers and wealthy employers. Misha, she said after I described the position details, $8,000 monthly for housekeeping work, suggests either exceptional circumstances or exceptional expectations. Wealthy families do not pay premium wages unless the job requires something beyond standard cleaning and maintenance. Her observation proved prescient, though neither of us could have anticipated the true nature of what those exceptional circumstances would entail. The Meridian Employment Services office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise building, featuring panoramic views of the Willamette River and Mount Hood beyond. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, arranged in an elegant chignon, directed me to a conference room furnished with leather chairs and artwork that appeared museum quality. The professional atmosphere projected success and discretion in equal measure. Victoria Ashford introduced herself as the senior placement coordinator and conducted the interview with practiced efficiency. She appeared to be approximately 40 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that suggested both authority and considerable personal wealth. Her questions focused primarily on my ability to maintain confidentiality, work independently without supervision, and adapt to the preferences of demanding employers. The position involves maintaining a private estate for a single resident who values privacy above all other considerations, she explained while reviewing my application material. You would be responsible for general housekeeping, meal preparation when requested, and ensuring that the property remains in pristine condition at all times. The work schedule requires 5 days weekly, with Tuesday and Wednesday designated as your personal time. The compensation details seemed almost surreal. Housing would be provided in a private cottage on the estate grounds, fully furnished and including all utilities. Meals could be prepared from the main house kitchen using any available ingredient. Health insurance coverage would commence immediately upon accepting the position. Most remarkably, the salary would be paid monthly in advance, with the first payment provided upon moving to the property. I must emphasize that discretion represents the most critical aspect of this position, Victoria continued, her tone becoming notably more serious. The employer has experienced significant challenges with previous staff members who proved unable to respect appropriate boundaries regarding privacy and confidentiality. Any violation of these expectations results in immediate termination without notice or severance compensation. I assured her that I understood the importance of professional discretion and had no interest in interfering with my employer's personal affairs. My primary motivation centered on financial stability and the opportunity to establish a foundation for rebuilding my career in social service. The isolation of estate work would actually provide additional time for continuing education and professional development activities. Victoria appeared satisfied with my responses and proceeded to explain the final steps of the placement process. Background verification would require approximately 1 week to complete, including criminal history checks, employment verification, and character references. Assuming satisfactory results, I would begin the position the following Monday and receive orientation materials prior to my arrival at the estate. One additional consideration, she mentioned as our meeting concluded. The employer specifically requested a staff member who could maintain complete invisibility during their daily activity. This means conducting your work efficiently without drawing attention to your presence or requiring regular interaction beyond essential communication regarding household operations. The concept of professional invisibility struck me as perfectly suited to my temperament and current life circumstances. After months of rejection and financial struggle, the opportunity to work diligently behind the scenes while rebuilding my stability seemed ideal. I had no desire for complicated workplace dynamics or demanding social expectations from wealthy employers. The background verification process concluded successfully, and Victoria contacted me the following Friday with final details for beginning the position. Transportation to the estate would be provided Monday morning at 8 o'clock, departing from the Meridian Employment Services office. I should pack personal belongings for an extended stay, as returning to Portland would be limited to my designated days off each week. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. I researched estate management techniques, reviewed professional housekeeping standards, and attempted to calm my anxiety about this dramatic change in circumstance. The financial relief felt almost overwhelming after months of constant stress about rent payments, grocery bills, and accumulating debt obligations. Monday morning arrived clear and crisp, with early autumn light filtering through the downtown Portland streets as I walked to the Meridian Employment Services building. My belongings fit into 2 large suitcases and a backpack containing my laptop and personal documents. Everything I owned could be transported in a single trip, reflecting how dramatically my circumstances had been reduced during the preceding month. The driver who collected me introduced himself simply as Robert, and maintained polite but minimal conversation during the hour-long journey east through the Columbia River Gorge. The landscape transformed gradually from urban density to rural expansiveness, with towering evergreen forests rising on both sides of the highway. Occasional glimpses of the Columbia River sparkled between the trees, creating a sense of natural grandeur that seemed worlds away from the concrete and traffic of downtown Portland. The estate covers approximately 200 acres, Robert mentioned as we turned onto a private road marked only by a discreet bronze plaque reading Blackwood. Most of the property remains in its natural forested state, with the developed areas concentrated near the main residence and outbuilding. Your cottage is located approximately half a mile from the main house, providing privacy while maintaining reasonable access for your daily responsibility. The private road wound through dense woodland for several miles before opening into a carefully landscaped clearing, dominated by a structure that defied my expectations of residential architecture. Blackwood Estate rose from the surrounding forest like a modern interpretation of a medieval fortress, combining glass, steel, and natural stone in proportions that suggested both elegance and strength. The main residence appeared to contain at least 30 rooms across 3 levels, with architectural details that indicated exceptional craftsmanship and unlimited construction budgets. Robert parked near a side entrance and retrieved my luggage from the vehicle. "Miss Patterson will provide your orientation and show you to your accommodation," he explained while transferring my belongings to a small electric cart. "She manages all household operations and will be your primary point of contact for questions or concerns regarding your daily responsibility." Mrs. Patricia Patterson appeared to be approximately 60 years old, with gray hair arranged in a practical style and clothing that suggested both professionalism and accessibility. Her manner projected competence and kindness in equal measure, creating an immediate sense of comfort that eased my nervousness about beginning this new position. "Welcome to Blackwood Estate, Alexandra," she said warmly while extending her hand in greeting. "I trust your journey was comfortable and that you are prepared to begin what I hope will prove to be a mutually beneficial arrangement. Let me show you to your cottage and then provide an overview of the estate operations and your specific responsibility." The staff cottage exceeded my expectations significantly, featuring a spacious living area, fully equipped kitchen, comfortable bedroom, and private bathroom with a luxurious shower that seemed designed for relaxation rather than mere functionality. The furnishings appeared expensive and carefully selected, creating an atmosphere of comfort that felt more like a vacation rental than employee housing. "Your employer believes that comfortable living conditions contribute to professional effectiveness," Ms. Patterson explained while showing me the various amenities. "The refrigerator has been stocked with basic necessities, and you are welcome to supplement from the main house kitchen, as needed. Internet access is provided throughout the property, and you will find television and streaming services available for your entertainment during personal time." She handed me a comprehensive orientation packet, containing detailed information about estate operations, emergency procedures, and specific guidelines for my daily responsibility. The schedule appeared straightforward and manageable, focusing primarily on maintaining cleanliness and order in the public areas of the main residence, while respecting the privacy of personal space. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The most important aspect of your position involves understanding that Ms. Blackwood values solitude and privacy above all other considerations. Mrs. Patterson emphasized while reviewing the orientation materials. "He works from his private office most days and prefers to conduct his activities without awareness of household staff present. Your success in this position depends primarily on your ability to complete your responsibilities efficiently while remaining essentially invisible to the household operation." The concept of professional invisibility began to feel more substantial as she described the specific techniques required for maintaining this standard. Cleaning activities should be scheduled during times when Mr. Blackwood typically remained in his private office or away from the estate entirely. Movement throughout the house should be conducted quietly and efficiently, avoiding areas where my presence might cause distraction or disruption. Communications should be limited to essential matters and conducted through Mrs. Patterson whenever possible. "Has he ever interacted directly with household staff?" I asked, curious about the level of isolation that seemed to surround my employer. "Very rarely," she replied thoughtfully. "Miss Blackwood experienced some difficult situations with previous staff members, who failed to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Since that time, he has preferred to minimize direct contact and focus on his business activities without household distraction. Your predecessor maintained this arrangement successfully for nearly 2 years before relocating for family reasons. The explanation seemed reasonable given the premium compensation and emphasis on discretion that had characterized the entire placement process. Wealthy individuals often developed elaborate privacy measures to protect themselves from unwanted attention or interference, and my role represented simply one component of that protective structure. Mrs. Patterson concluded the orientation by providing me with a master key and detailed map of the estate grounds. My primary responsibilities would focus on the main house common areas, including the kitchen, dining room, library, living spaces, and guest accommodations. Miss Blackwood's private office, bedroom suite, and personal study remained off-limits, except for specific cleaning requests communicated through Mrs. Patterson. I will check with you weekly to address any questions or concerns and ensure that you have everything necessary for success in your position, she assured me before departing. Miss Blackwood appreciates excellence in all aspects of estate operations, and I believe you will find this opportunity both rewarding and professionally satisfying. That first evening in the cottage, I unpacked my belongings and attempted to process the dramatic transformation in my circumstance. The financial pressure that had dominated my thoughts for months had evaporated instantly, replaced by the security of steady income and comfortable living conditions. The isolation felt peaceful rather than lonely, providing an opportunity for reflection and planning that had been impossible during the chaos of my previous situation. I spent several hours reviewing the orientation materials and developing a systematic approach to my daily responsibility. The main house contained approximately 15,000 square feet of living space, with rooms that reflected exceptional taste and unlimited budgets for furnishing and decoration. Maintaining such a property to the highest standards would require careful planning and consistent effort, but the work seemed manageable given the generous time allocation and lack of additional demand. The following morning, I began my first official day as a member of the Blackwood estate household staff. The main residence remained silent as I entered through the service entrance at precisely 7 o'clock, carrying the supplies and equipment necessary for beginning my cleaning routine. The kitchen showed no evidence of recent use, suggesting that Mr. Blackwood had either eaten elsewhere or prepared something minimal that required no cleanup. I established a systematic approach that would allow me to clean each area thoroughly, while minimizing the time spent in any particular location. The library required careful attention to preserve the extensive collection of books and documents, while the living areas needed regular maintenance to preserve the pristine appearance that characterized every aspect of the estate operation. By mid-morning, I had developed a comfortable rhythm that allowed me to work efficiently, while remaining alert for any indication of Mr. Blackwood's presence. The house remained completely silent except for the occasional sounds of my own activities, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that felt both peaceful and slightly surreal. It was during my third week at the estate that I first became aware of subtle indications that my activities might not be as unobserved as I had initially believed. While cleaning the main library, I noticed that several books had been moved from their previous positions, despite the fact that I had been the only person to enter that room since my previous cleaning session. The changes were minimal and could have been attributed to routine household settling, but something about the deliberate nature of the rearrangement suggested human intervention. Similar observations accumulated gradually over the following day. A coffee cup appeared in the kitchen sink, after I had confirmed that all dishes were clean and properly stored. Curtains in the living room had been adjusted to different positions than I had left them. Most puzzling, the fresh flowers that I arranged weekly in the main entrance hall showed signs of having been examined closely, with several blooms rotated to display different angles than my original arrangement. The possibility that Miss Blackwood was observing my work more closely than indicated in my orientation materials created a sense of mild unease that grew stronger with each passing day. I began to second-guess my techniques and timing, wondering whether my presence was somehow more intrusive than intended despite my careful adherence to the invisibility guidelines. Miss Patterson arrived for our weekly check-in meeting on a Thursday afternoon, bringing with her the usual supply of household necessities and a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. I had been debating whether to mention my observations about the subtle changes throughout the house, uncertain whether such details were worth discussing, or merely the product of an overactive imagination. "How are you finding the positions so far?" she asked while reviewing my supply requests and updating her household management notes. "I hope the work has proven manageable and that you are comfortable with the estate environment." I assured her that the position exceeded my expectations in every respect, and that I felt grateful for the opportunity to work in such beautiful surroundings. The cottage provided perfect accommodations, the responsibilities were well within my capabilities, and the compensation allowed me to address my financial obligations while building savings for future goals. "I have noticed some small changes around the house that suggest Miss Blackwood might be spending more time in the common areas than I initially understood," I mentioned carefully. "I want to ensure that my schedule is not creating any inconvenience or disruption to his daily routine." Miss Patterson paused in her note-taking and looked at me with an expression that seemed to combine surprise with something approaching concern. "What sort of changes have you observed?" I described the rearranged books, the occasional dishes, and the adjusted flower arrangements, emphasizing that none of these observations suggested any problems, but simply indicated that my understanding of the household patterns might be incomplete. Miss Patterson listened carefully without interrupting, occasionally nodding as if my comments confirmed something she had been considering. "Mr. Blackwood has indeed been spending more time in the public areas recently," she acknowledged after I finished my observation. "This represents a significant change from his previous patterns, and I appreciate your awareness of these details. It suggests that your presence has been less disruptive than anticipated." Her phrasing struck me as odd, implying that my employer's increased comfort in his own home was somehow unexpected or noteworthy. I had assumed that effective household staff should enable residents to use their living spaces freely without concern about intrusion or disruption. "Has this created any problems that I should address differently?" I asked, hoping to understand whether modifications to my schedule or techniques would be helpful. "On the contrary," Mrs. Patterson replied with a slight smile that seemed to contain information she was not prepared to share. "I believe your approach has been exactly what was needed. Continue with your current schedule and methods, and please keep me informed of any additional observations that seem relevant." Our conversation concluded with her usual reminders about supply procedures and emergency protocols, but I detected a subtle shift in her manner that suggested my comments had provided significant information about household dynamics that she had been monitoring. The impression remained with me throughout the rest of that week, creating a growing curiosity about the true nature of my role at Blackwood Estate. The revelation that would transform my understanding of everything began with a simple mistake during my 5th week of employment. While cleaning the main library on a Friday morning, I accidentally knocked over a small decorative box from one of the reading tables, scattering its contents across the Persian carpet. As I gathered the various items to return them to their proper places, my attention focused on a small key that seemed distinctly different from the others in the collection. The key appeared modern and electronic rather than traditional brass or steel, with a black plastic head containing what looked like a small LED indicator. Unlike the antique keys that corresponded to various estate locks and storage areas, this key seemed designed for contemporary security systems or electronic access controls. Curiosity overcame my professional restraint as I examined the key more closely, discovering tiny text printed along one edge that read, "Security Archive Access." The implications of such a designation created a mixture of intrigue and apprehension that I struggled to suppress while completing my cleaning responsibilities for the day. That evening in my cottage, I found myself unable to concentrate on my usual activities, as questions about the security archive key dominated my thoughts. The estate contained obvious security measures including cameras, motion sensors, and electronic locks, but I had never encountered any reference to an archive system that would require special access credentials. The logical explanation suggested that Ms. Blackwood maintained digital records of security footage for insurance or safety purposes, which would be entirely reasonable for a property of this size and value. However, the careful concealment of the access key and my growing awareness of subtle surveillance suggested that the security arrangements might be more extensive than initially apparent. My decision to investigate further was driven partly by curiosity and partly by a growing sense that my role at the estate involved factors that had not been fully disclosed during my orientation. The following Monday morning, I began my usual cleaning routine with additional attention to any security equipment or electronic systems that might be connected to the mysterious archive. The search proved more rewarding than anticipated when I discovered a concealed panel behind a seemingly decorative wooden carving in the main library. The panel opened to reveal a sophisticated electronic access system with a small slot that appeared designed specifically for the key I had found. After several minutes of internal debate about the wisdom of proceeding, my curiosity ultimately overrode my professional caution. The key activated the system immediately, causing the LED indicator to glow green while a hidden monitor emerged from behind another concealed panel. The screen displayed a menu of options that confirmed my suspicions about the true nature of the estate's security arrangement. Archive access, live monitoring, personnel files, and daily reports appeared as selectable categories, each suggesting capabilities far beyond standard residential security systems. My heart rate accelerated dramatically as I selected the personnel files option and discovered a comprehensive folder labeled with my full name and employment date. The file contained not only my official application materials and background verification results, but also detailed daily reports documenting my activities, behavior patterns, and performance evaluations that had been compiled without my knowledge. The reports revealed that my every movement throughout the estate had been monitored and recorded since my first day of employment. Subject demonstrates exceptional attention to detail and completes assigned tasks efficiently without requiring supervision. Read one entry dated from my second week. Maintains appropriate professional boundaries and shows no evidence of curiosity regarding restricted areas or personal belongings. More disturbing were the detailed behavioral analyses that accompanied each report. Subject appears to experience mild anxiety regarding employer approval but demonstrates strong commitment to meeting performance expectations. Facial expression and body language suggest genuine satisfaction with working conditions and compensation arrangement. No indications of deceptive behavior or hidden agendas detected during monitoring period. The realization that I had been under constant surveillance since arriving at the estate created a complex mixture of emotions, ranging from violation and anger to curiosity about the purpose behind such extensive monitoring. The level of detail in the reports suggested sophisticated analysis capabilities that extended far beyond simple security cameras and motion sensors. As I continued reviewing the file contents, I discovered video footage that documented specific moments from my daily work routine. The cameras had captured not only my cleaning activities, but also private moments when I believed myself to be unobserved, including times when I paused to appreciate artwork, adjusted flowers for aesthetic reasons, or simply stood quietly in beautiful rooms, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. The most shocking discovery came when I accessed a subfolder labeled Behavioral Assessment Summary. The document contained a psychological profile that analyzed my personality traits, emotional stability, and predicted likelihood of success in the position based on observed behaviors during my first month of employment. Subject demonstrates remarkable emotional resilience and adaptability despite recent personal and financial difficulties, the assessment concluded. Professional discretion appears genuine rather than calculated, suggesting natural inclination toward privacy and respect for boundaries. Recommend continued monitoring with potential for expanded responsibilities pending successful completion of initial trial period. The reference to expanded responsibilities implied that my current position represented merely the beginning of whatever arrangement Ms. Blackwood had planned for my employment. The extensive psychological analysis suggested that my presence at the estate served purposes beyond simple household maintenance, though the true nature of those purposes remained unclear. My hands trembled as I navigated through additional folders containing similar files for previous staff members.
The documentation revealed a pattern of extensive surveillance and behavioral analysis that had been applied consistently to all household employees over several years.
Most disturbing was the discovery that several previous staff members had been terminated for failure to meet psychological stability requirements, rather than for performance deficiencies. The surveillance system appeared designed not just to monitor work activities, but to conduct comprehensive psychological evaluation of staff members over extended periods. The implications of such scrutiny created a profound sense of violation that fundamentally altered my perception of my employment situation and my relationship with the estate. As I prepared to log out of the system and return the key to its original location, one final folder caught my attention, labeled Current Phase Assessment. It contained recent reports dated through the previous day. The most recent entry, completed just hours before my discovery, contained a single line that stopped my breath entirely. Subject has demonstrated readiness for direct contact initiation. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2 of integration protocol immediately. The words suggested that my 18 months of invisible service had been a carefully orchestrated evaluation process, leading to some predetermined next phase of my employment arrangement. The discovery that my entire experience at Blackwood Estate had been designed and monitored according to a specific protocol created a fundamental shift in my understanding of my situation and my relationship with my mysterious employer. I realized that nothing about my presence at the estate had been coincidental or routine. Every aspect of my employment, from the initial job posting through my daily responsibilities and living arrangements, had been carefully designed to evaluate my suitability for purposes that remained hidden but were clearly more significant than housekeeping services. The revelation that I was supposed to be invisible while being watched all along meant that 18 months of my life had been lived under false pretenses, observed and analyzed by someone whose motives and intentions remained completely unknown. The comfortable isolation that I had treasured now felt like a carefully constructed trap, and the generous compensation seemed less like kindness and more like payment for my unwitting participation in an elaborate psychological experiment. As I carefully returned the security system to its concealed state and replaced the access key in its original location, I knew that my life at Blackwood Estate was about to change dramatically. The question that haunted me was whether that change would represent opportunity or danger, and whether my 18 months of invisible service had prepared me for whatever came next. The discovery of the surveillance system and psychological evaluation protocols created a complete disruption of my mental equilibrium that manifested in every aspect of my daily existence. The comfortable routine that had provided stability and peace during my 18 months at Blackwood Estate transformed overnight into a source of constant anxiety and hypervigilance. Every movement felt scrutinized, every expression potentially analyzed, and every moment of privacy violated by the knowledge that sophisticated monitoring systems were documenting my behaviors for purposes I could not comprehend. Sleep became elusive as my mind raced through the implications of what I had uncovered. The detailed psychological assessments revealed that my most private moments had been observed and interpreted by unknown analysts who possessed intimate knowledge of my emotional responses, stress patterns, and behavioral tendencies. The violation felt more profound than simple surveillance because it involved the systematic collection and analysis of psychological data that I had never consented to provide. The morning following my discovery, I attempted to maintain my usual cleaning schedule while grappling with the knowledge that each movement was being recorded and evaluated. The natural spontaneity that had characterized my work disappeared entirely, replaced by stilted movements and constant second-guessing about how my actions might be interpreted by the invisible observer. The beautiful estate that had become my sanctuary now felt like an elaborate stage where I performed unknowingly for an audience whose motives remained mysterious and potentially threatening. My relationship with Ms. Patterson underwent a fundamental transformation as I questioned whether her weekly visits were genuine management check-ins or opportunities to gather additional intelligence about my psychological state. Her seemingly innocent questions about my comfort and satisfaction now carried undertones of data collection that made authentic communication impossible. I found myself constructing careful responses designed to reveal nothing substantive while maintaining the appearance of cooperation and contentment. The cottage that had provided refuge and privacy now felt compromised and unsafe. I conducted thorough searches for hidden cameras and recording devices, discovering several sophisticated surveillance installations concealed within decorative elements and household fixtures. The realization that my most intimate moments had been observed created a profound sense of violation that affected my ability to relax or feel secure even during designated personal time. Professional performance suffered dramatically as the psychological pressure of constant observation interfered with my ability to focus on routine tasks. Simple activities like arranging flowers or organizing books became sources of anxiety as I worried about how my choices might be interpreted by the analyst reviewing the footage. The natural rhythm and efficiency that had characterized my work deteriorated into hesitant, overthought movements that reflected my internal turmoil. Financial considerations complicated my response to these revelations significantly. The generous compensation had allowed me to eliminate my student loan debt, build substantial savings, and provide financial support for my mother's ongoing medical expenses. Walking away from the position would mean returning to the precarious economic circumstances that had driven me to accept the opportunity initially. The prospect of explaining my departure to potential future employers without revealing confidential information about Blackwood Estate created additional complications that seemed almost insurmountable. The isolation that had previously felt peaceful now became a source of increasing distress. Living alone on the estate grounds with limited outside contact meant that I had no reliable source of perspective or advice regarding my situation. My designated days off provided temporary escape to Portland, but the brief respites were insufficient to process the psychological impact of discovering that my entire employment had been conducted under false pretenses. Sleep disturbances intensified during the second week following my discovery. Nightmares featuring surveillance and psychological manipulation replaced the restful sleep that had characterized my time at the estate previously. I found myself waking repeatedly throughout the night, imagining sounds or movements that might indicate the presence of observer. The stress manifested in physical symptoms including headaches, digestive problems, and a persistent sense of nervous tension that made relaxation impossible. Work performance continued to decline as my preoccupation with the surveillance situation interfered with concentration and attention to detail. Tasks that had previously required minimal conscious effort now demanded intense focus to complete adequate. I worried constantly about whether the deterioration in my performance was being documented and analyzed, creating a feedback loop that exacerbated my anxiety and made improvement increasingly difficult. The psychological assessment documents had referenced expanded responsibilities and a second phase of the integration protocol. This knowledge created additional stress as I wondered what those expanded responsibilities might involve, and whether declining to participate would result in termination or other negative consequence. The reference to integration suggested that my employment was preparation for involvement in activities beyond household maintenance, but the nature of those activities remained completely unknown. Ms. Patterson's weekly visit during this period provided the first indication that my changed behavior had been detected by the monitoring system. Her usual warm demeanor was replaced by a more formal clinical approach that suggested she was operating according to specific protocols for managing staff members who had discovered information about the surveillance arrangement. I understand that you may be experiencing some stress adjusting to certain aspects of your position. She began carefully, her language suggesting that she was aware of my discovery without explicitly acknowledging the surveillance system. These adjustment periods are normal and typically resolve successfully with appropriate support and understanding of the situation. Her phrasing confirmed that my discovery was not accidental but rather an expected development that had occurred according to a predetermined timeline. The psychological evaluation system was designed not only to monitor staff behavior but also to predict when individuals would uncover the surveillance arrangements and how they would respond to that discovery. I want to assure you that your position remains secure and that the estate management appreciates your dedication and professional performance. She continued, delivering what appeared to be a prepared statement designed to address specific concerns. However, certain aspects of your employment arrangement may require clarification as you continue to develop in your role here. The conversation felt scripted and manipulative, designed to maintain my cooperation while avoiding direct acknowledgement of the surveillance system or its purpose. Mrs. Patterson's demeanor suggested that she was following established procedures for managing staff members who had reached this phase of the evaluation process, which implied that my experience was neither unique nor unexpected. "What clarifications are you referring to?" I asked, hoping to obtain concrete information about my situation while maintaining the pretense that I was unaware of the true extent of the monitoring system. "Blackwood would like to meet with you personally to discuss the future direction of your employment and potential opportunities for expanded involvement in estate operations," she replied, confirming that the direct contact referenced in the surveillance reports was indeed imminent. "He has been quite pleased with your performance and believes that you may be suitable for additional responsibilities that would provide greater professional fulfillment and enhanced compensation." The prospect of meeting my mysterious employer created a complex mixture of anxiety and anticipation. After 18 months of invisible service, the opportunity to understand the true nature of my employment and the purposes behind the elaborate surveillance arrangements provided potential answers to questions that had been consuming my thoughts since the discovery. However, the knowledge that this meeting represented a predetermined phase of an integration protocol rather than a spontaneous recognition of my capabilities diminished any sense of genuine achievement or professional validation. Everything about my employment had been orchestrated according to a specific plan, and this apparent advancement was merely the next step in a process designed to achieve objectives that remained hidden from me. "When would this meeting take place?" I asked, attempting to maintain a professional demeanor while processing the implications of direct contact with the person who had been monitoring my every movement for over a year. "Tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock in the main library," Patterson replied with the precision that suggested this timing had been predetermined rather than arranged around mutual convenience. "Mr. Blackwood prefers evening meetings as they provide a more relaxed atmosphere for important conversation." The choice of the library as a meeting location felt significant, given that it was the room where I had discovered the surveillance system access key. The selection suggested either coincidence or careful orchestration designed to acknowledge my discovery without requiring explicit discussion of the surveillance arrangements. That evening, I spent hours preparing for the meeting while trying to anticipate what objectives Blackwood might reveal and how I should respond to various potential scenarios. The expanded responsibilities mentioned in the surveillance reports could range from legitimate business activities to something more questionable that would require careful consideration before accepting. My primary concern centered on whether declining any proposed expanded responsibilities would result in termination and the loss of the financial stability that had transformed my life circumstances. The psychological assessments had demonstrated that the estate management possessed detailed knowledge of my financial pressures and family obligations, which could be used to influence my decision-making regarding future employment arrangements. Sleep proved impossible as I rehearsed potential conversations and considered various responses to different scenarios that might unfold during the meeting. The uncertainty about Mr. Blackwood's objectives and the true purpose of the surveillance system created anxiety that manifested in physical symptoms including rapid heartbeat, sweating, and persistent nervous tension. The following day passed slowly as I attempted to maintain my usual cleaning routine while preparing mentally for the evening meeting. Work performance suffered significantly as my concentration remained focused on the upcoming conversation rather than the tasks at hand. Simple activities required excessive time and effort as my mind continued processing potential outcomes and appropriate responses. As 7 o'clock approached, I dressed carefully in professional attire that projected competence and confidence while remaining appropriate for household staff. The choice of clothing felt important as it would create the first impression during my initial direct contact with the person who had been observing my behavior for 18 months through surveillance system. The main library appeared different in the evening light, with warm illumination from table lamps creating an intimate atmosphere that contrasted with the bright natural lighting during my usual daytime cleaning session. The room felt simultaneously familiar and foreign as I prepared to meet the mysterious figure who had shaped my employment experience from behind the scenes. At precisely 7 o'clock, footsteps approached the library door and I experienced a moment of profound anticipation mixed with anxiety as I prepared to finally meet the man whose surveillance systems had documented my life in extraordinary detail. The sound of the door opening marked the end of my invisible existence at Blackwood Estate, and the beginning of a new phase that would determine whether my 18 months of unknowing evaluation had prepared me for opportunity or placed me in a position of vulnerability and potential exploitation. The person who entered the library defied my expectations completely. Rather than the elderly, imposing figure I had imagined, Sebastian Blackwood appeared to be approximately 40 years old, with dark hair, intelligent eyes, and a presence that projected both authority and unexpected warmth. His clothing was casual but expensive, suggesting confidence and success without ostentation. Most surprising was his manner, which seemed genuinely nervous rather than coldly calculated. "Miss Torres," he began, his voice carrying a slight tremor that suggested he was as apprehensive about this meeting as I was. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I realize that certain aspects of your employment here may have raised questions, and I believe it is time to provide some clarification about the situation." His acknowledgement that my employment had involved questionable elements provided immediate relief that the conversation would include honest discussion rather than continued deception. However, his apparent nervousness created additional uncertainty about his motives and objectives for arranging this meeting. "I want to begin by apologizing for the surveillance arrangements that you discovered," he continued, confirming that my investigation had been detected, and that the meeting was specifically prompted by that discovery. "The monitoring systems were implemented for reasons that I hope to explain, but I recognize that their existence without your knowledge represents a significant breach of trust and privacy." The direct acknowledgement of the surveillance and the apology for its implementation suggested Sebastian Blackwood was not the calculating manipulator I had imagined, but rather someone who had implemented the monitoring systems for reasons that he considered justified, but was now questioned. His obvious discomfort with the situation indicated that maintaining the surveillance had not been emotionally easy for him. "The truth is that your employment here was not arranged randomly," he admitted, his candor creating both relief and apprehension about what revelations might follow. "Your background, qualifications, and personal circumstances made you an ideal candidate for a position that extends beyond household maintenance. But I needed to evaluate your character and capabilities before proposing anything that would involve greater responsibility and risk." The confirmation that my employment had been orchestrated according to specific criteria provided answers to questions that had troubled me since discovering the surveillance system. However, the reference to greater responsibility and risk created new concerns about what activity Sebastian Blackwood might be involved in that would require such extensive evaluation of potential participants. "What kind of responsibility and risk are you referring to?" I asked, hoping to understand the true nature of my situation and the objectives behind the elaborate evaluation process. Sebastian paused before responding, his expression suggesting that he was carefully considering how much information to reveal during this initial conversation. "I am involved in activities that require absolute discretion and the assistance of individuals whose integrity and judgment can be trusted completely. The surveillance was designed to evaluate whether you possess the qualities necessary for involvement in those activities." His explanation remained deliberately vague, but the emphasis on discretion and integrity suggested that the activities involved either sensitive business dealings or potentially illegal operations that would require careful participant selection. The extensive psychological evaluation suddenly made more sense if the purpose was to identify individuals who could be trusted with confidential or potentially incriminating information. "Before we discuss specifics," Sebastian continued, "I want to ensure that you understand that participation in expanded responsibilities would be entirely voluntary. Your current position and compensation will continue regardless of your decision about additional involvement. However, I believe that the opportunities I can offer would provide significantly greater professional fulfillment and financial benefits than your current arrangement." The assurance that my existing employment would continue provided relief about my immediate security, but the emphasis on voluntary participation
suggested that the proposed activities carried risks that required genuine consent rather than coercion. The promise of enhanced benefits indicated that the responsibilities would be substantial enough to justify additional compensation. I need to understand what these activities involve before I can consider any form of participation, I replied, attempting to maintain a professional demeanor while seeking the information necessary to make an informed decision about my future at Blackwood Estate. Sebastian nodded approvingly at my request for specifics, his expression suggesting that my cautious approach aligned with his expectations and requirements for the position he was considering offering. The activities involve investigating and documenting corporate corruption, fraud, and illegal activities conducted by individuals and organizations that believe themselves to be above legal consequence. The revelation that Sebastian Blackwood was involved in some form of investigative work rather than illegal activities provided immediate relief about the moral implications of potential participation. However, the reference to investigating powerful individuals and organizations suggested that the work carried significant personal and professional risks that would require careful consideration. My role involves providing financial and logistical support for journalists, investigators, and legal professionals who are working to expose corporate misconduct but lack the resources necessary to conduct thorough investigations, he explained further. The surveillance systems that monitored your behavior were designed to evaluate whether you possess the psychological stability and ethical foundation necessary to assist with activities that often involve significant personal risk. The explanation transformed my understanding of the surveillance from violation to evaluation for a position that carried genuine social value. However, the acknowledgement that the work involved significant personal risk created new concerns about whether I possessed the courage and capabilities necessary for such responsibilities. Why was I selected as a potential candidate for this type of work? I asked, curious about what qualifications or characteristics had made me suitable for consideration. Your background in social work demonstrates a commitment to helping others and addressing systemic problems, Sebastian replied. Your financial circumstances created motivation for meaningful employment, and your academic performance indicated intelligence and analytical capabilities. Most importantly, your behavior during the evaluation period demonstrated integrity, discretion, and emotional stability under pressure. The explanation provided a logical rationale for my selection, while acknowledging the personal qualities that had been assessed through the surveillance system. However, the reference to emotional stability under pressure suggested that the work would involve situations that could be psychologically demanding and potentially dangerous. Our conversation continued for over 2 hours as Sebastian provided increasingly detailed information about the investigative activities and the role he envisioned for me within those operations. The work would involve research, documentation, coordination with external investigators, and occasionally serving as a liaison with individuals who possessed information about corporate misconduct but required assurance of confidentiality and protection. The compensation for expanded responsibilities would triple my current salary while providing comprehensive health insurance, legal protection, and financial security for my family. Most importantly, the work would provide opportunities to contribute meaningfully to exposing injustice and holding powerful individuals accountable for illegal activities that harmed ordinary people. However, the risks were substantial and genuine. Corporate executives and organizations under investigation possessed significant resources and would not hesitate to use intimidation, legal pressure, or worse to protect their interests. Previous individuals involved in similar investigations had experienced harassment, threats, and professional retaliation that had lasting effects on their personal and professional lives. As our meeting concluded, Sebastian emphasized that I should take whatever time necessary to consider the opportunity carefully before making any decision about expanded involvement. He provided contact information for individuals who could answer additional questions about the investigative activities and the support systems in place to protect participants from retaliation. The revelation that my 18 months of invisible service had been preparation for the opportunity to participate in meaningful social justice work created a fundamental shift in my perception of my experience at Blackwood Estate. Rather than being the victim of manipulative surveillance, I had been evaluated for a position that aligned with my deepest values and professional aspirations, while providing the financial security that had seemed impossible to achieve through traditional social services employment. However, the decision to accept expanded responsibilities would represent a commitment to activities that carried genuine personal risk and would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my life and career. The comfortable anonymity that had characterized my time at the estate would be replaced by involvement in investigations that could attract the attention of powerful and potentially dangerous individuals who would view my activities as threatening to their interests. The knowledge that Sebastian Blackwood had observed my behavior for 18 months while planning to offer this opportunity created complex emotions that ranged from gratitude for the professional possibilities to concern about the methods used to evaluate my suitability. The surveillance had been conducted without my knowledge or consent, but the purpose had been to provide opportunities that would never have been available through conventional employment channels. As I returned to my cottage that evening, I carried the weight of a decision that would determine whether my future involved continued invisible service in comfortable obscurity or active participation in work that could provide genuine meaning and impact while exposing me to risks that I had never previously considered. The 18 months of unknowing preparation had concluded, and the next phase of my life would depend on whether I possessed the courage to accept the challenges and opportunities that Sebastian Blackwood had revealed. The revelation that Sebastian Blackwood sought my participation in corporate corruption investigations created a profound internal conflict that required solitary contemplation away from external influences and pressure. I requested a temporary suspension of my cleaning responsibilities to allow for comprehensive consideration of the opportunity he had presented. This decision initiated a period of deliberate isolation within the cottage that became a crucible for examining my deepest values, fears, and aspirations regarding the direction of my professional and personal. The comfortable cottage that had served as my sanctuary throughout 18 months of estate employment transformed into a space for intensive self-examination and reflection. I established a systematic approach to analyzing the investigative opportunity from multiple perspectives, creating detailed written assessments of the potential benefits, risks, and long-term implications of accepting expanded responsibilities within Sebastian's operation. Financial considerations dominated my initial analysis as I calculated the transformative impact that tripled compensation would have on my family's circumstances and my future security. The proposed salary would enable complete elimination of my mother's remaining medical debt while establishing substantial savings for emergencies and long-term investment. More significantly, the comprehensive benefits package would provide healthcare coverage that could prevent future financial crises related to unexpected medical expenses. However, financial motivations alone proved insufficient to resolve the complex ethical and personal questions raised by the opportunity. The investigative work would require involvement in activities that carried genuine legal and physical risks, while potentially exposing me to retaliation from powerful individuals who possessed extensive resources for protecting their interests. These considerations demanded careful evaluation of my personal courage, risk tolerance, and commitment to social justice principles. My background in social work had initially attracted me to careers focused on systemic change and advocacy for vulnerable populations. The corporate corruption investigations that Sebastian described aligned closely with these values by targeting individuals and organizations whose illegal activities harmed ordinary people through fraud, environmental damage, and economic exploitation. The opportunity to contribute meaningfully to exposing such misconduct represented the type of impactful work that had motivated my original career aspiration. Yet the clandestine nature of the investigative activities created ethical concerns about operating outside traditional legal and regulatory frameworks, while Sebastian emphasized that their work supported legitimate journalists and legal professionals. The secretive methods and sophisticated surveillance capabilities suggested an approach that existed in ambiguous territory between lawful investigation and potentially questionable intelligence gathering.
The isolation period provided opportunity to research Sebastian Blackwood's background and verify his claims about the nature and legitimacy of his investigative activities. Using the cottage's internet access, I conducted extensive searches for information about his business operations, professional associations, and public statements regarding corporate accountability and investigative journalism. These investigations revealed that Sebastian had established multiple philanthropic foundations focused on supporting investigative reporting and legal advocacy for corporate accountability. Public financial records indicated substantial contributions to established journalistic organizations and legal aid societies that specialized in corporate misconduct cases. His professional background included advanced degrees in business and law, along with previous employment at reputable firms that specialized in corporate compliance and regulatory affairs. The research provided reassurance that Sebastian's claims about supporting legitimate investigative activities were accurate rather than elaborate deceptions designed to recruit participants for illegal operations. However, the sophisticated surveillance capabilities and secretive operational methods suggested that his activities extended beyond simple philanthropic support for established organizations. During the second week of isolation, I began examining my personal psychological readiness for work that would involve significant stress, potential danger, and the emotional burden of documenting human suffering caused by corporate misconduct. The surveillance reports had identified emotional stability as a critical qualification, but I questioned whether my responses to everyday challenges provided adequate preparation for the intense pressures associated with investigating powerful adversaries. My experience with my mother's medical crisis had demonstrated resilience and problem-solving capabilities under severe financial pressure. The months of job searching and economic uncertainty had developed persistence and adaptability that enabled survival during difficult circumstances. However, these challenges involved primarily personal and family concerns rather than the broader social and political implications associated with corporate corruption investigation. The 18 months of invisible service at Blackwood Estate had provided additional insights into my psychological functioning under unique circumstances. The initial period of adjustment to isolation and surveillance had required emotional flexibility and the ability to maintain professional performance despite personal uncertainty. The discovery of the monitoring systems had tested my capacity to process shocking information while continuing to function effectively in a complex environment. Yet the investigative work would involve deliberately seeking out information about illegal activities conducted by individuals who possess significant power and resources for protecting themselves. This would require sustained courage and commitment despite potential threats, harassment, and professional retaliation that could affect not only my own welfare, but also the safety and security of my family members. The third week of isolation focused on examining my relationships and responsibilities to others who might be affected by my decision to accept expanded involvement in Sebastian's operation. My mother's dependence on my financial support created obligations that extended beyond personal considerations to include her ongoing medical needs and basic living expenses. Accepting investigative work would provide enhanced financial resources, but might also expose her to risks if powerful adversaries decided to pressure me through threats against family members. The consideration of potential risks to my mother created profound moral conflict between my desire to contribute to meaningful social justice work and my responsibility to protect the person who had made my education and current opportunities possible. The investigative activities might ultimately benefit society by exposing corporate misconduct, but my participation could place an innocent person in danger simply because of our family relationship. I contacted my mother during this period to discuss general career considerations without revealing specific details about the investigative opportunity. Her perspective on risk and responsibility reflected the wisdom gained through decades of building a business while supporting our family as a single parent. She emphasized that meaningful work often required accepting certain risks while taking appropriate precautions to minimize potential negative consequences. Nisha, she said during our conversation, safe choices do not always lead to fulfilling lives. Sometimes we must have courage to pursue opportunities that align with our deepest values, even when those opportunities involve uncertainty and challenge. Her words provided valuable perspective on the balance between prudent caution and the courage necessary for pursuing work that could provide genuine professional fulfillment and social impact. However, she was offering this advice without knowledge of the specific risks associated with investigating corporate corruption, which created additional complexity regarding the appropriateness of accepting her guidance. The fourth week of isolation involved detailed analysis of the practical aspects of investigative work, including the specific skills and capabilities that would be required for successful performance in the role Sebastian had described. The position would involve research, documentation, coordination with external professionals, and potentially serving as a liaison with individuals who possessed sensitive information about corporate misconduct. My academic background in social work had provided research and analytical skills that would be applicable to investigating complex organizational structures and financial arrangements. The coursework in policy analysis and program evaluation had developed capabilities for understanding systemic problems and identifying evidence of institutional dysfunction. Additionally, my experience working with vulnerable populations had demonstrated sensitivity and discretion when handling confidential information. However, the investigative work would also require technical skills related to financial analysis, legal research, and potentially sophisticated information gathering techniques that extended beyond my current capability. Sebastian had indicated that comprehensive training would be provided for any additional skills necessary for effective performance, but the learning process would require significant time and effort while adapting to an entirely different professional environment. The transition from household maintenance to investigative work would represent a fundamental change in professional identity and daily responsibility. The comfortable routines and predictable challenges of estate management would be replaced by dynamic, potentially dangerous situations that required quick thinking and adaptability under pressure. This transformation would test not only my technical capabilities but also my emotional resilience and commitment to the work. During the fifth week of isolation, I began developing a framework for making the final decision about Sebastian's offer. This framework involved establishing specific criteria for evaluation while considering both rational analysis and intuitive responses to the opportunity. The process required honest assessment of my motivations, capabilities, and long-term professional aspirations. The first criterion involved alignment between the investigative work and my fundamental values regarding social justice and accountability. The opportunity to contribute to exposing corporate misconduct that harmed ordinary people resonated strongly with the motivations that had originally attracted me to social work. The chance to participate in meaningful systemic change represented the type of impact that traditional social services positions had rarely provided. The second criterion focused on my realistic assessment of the personal and professional risks associated with the investigative activity. While the dangers were genuine and substantial, Sebastian had described comprehensive support systems and protection measures designed to minimize exposure while enabling effective participation in the investigation. The financial benefits would provide security that could help offset some risks while enabling better protection for my family. The third criterion involved evaluation of my psychological readiness for the demands and stresses associated with investigating powerful adversaries. The 18 months of estate employment had demonstrated emotional stability and adaptability, while my academic and professional background had developed analytical and interpersonal skills that would be applicable to investigative work. However, the ultimate test would occur only through actual participation in the activities. The final criterion concerned the long-term implications of accepting or declining the opportunity. Accepting would represent a commitment to a career path that offered significant potential for impact and fulfillment, but also carried risks that could affect my entire future. Declining would mean continuing the comfortable but limited role of household maintenance, while potentially forgoing the chance to pursue work that aligned with my deepest professional aspirations. The isolation period had provided the time and space necessary for comprehensive consideration of these complex factors without external pressure or influence. The solitary reflection had enabled honest examination of my fears, motivations, and capabilities, while developing clarity about my values and priorities regarding the direction of my life and career. As the fifth week of isolation concluded, I recognized that the decision process had fundamentally transformed my understanding of my own character and aspiration. The 18 months of invisible service had been preparation not only for potential investigative work, but also for the type of serious self-examination that was necessary for making life-altering decisions about professional direction and personal value. The extensive analysis had revealed that my initial attraction to social work remained strong and that the investigative opportunity represented a chance to pursue those values in a context that offered greater potential for meaningful impact than traditional social services positions. The financial benefits would provide security and stability that could enhance my ability to contribute effectively while protecting my family from economic uncertainty. However, the decision also required acceptance of risks and responsibilities that extended far beyond my previous experience or comfort zone. The investigative work would demand sustained courage, emotional resilience, and technical capabilities that would require significant personal and professional development. The commitment would affect not only my own life, but also the welfare and security of family members who had supported my education and career development. The isolation period had provided the foundation for making an informed decision based on careful analysis rather than emotional reaction or external pressure. The solitary reflection had enabled development of clarity about my values, capabilities, and long-term aspirations, while honestly acknowledging the challenges and uncertainty associated with the investigative opportunity. Most importantly, the period of deliberate isolation had demonstrated that I possessed the psychological strength and analytical capabilities necessary for making complex decisions under pressure. This realization provided confidence that I could handle the demands and stresses associated with investigative work while maintaining the ethical foundation and personal integrity that would be essential for effective performance in such a role. The self-examination process had also revealed that the comfortable security of household maintenance, while financially beneficial and personally satisfying, did not provide the type of professional fulfillment and social impact that aligned with my deepest career aspirations. The opportunity to contribute to exposing corporate misconduct represented a chance to pursue work that could provide genuine meaning and purpose while utilizing my skills and education in ways that traditional employment had not allowed. As I prepared to conclude the isolation period and communicate my decision to Sebastian, I carried with me a deeper understanding of my own character, values, and capabilities than had existed prior to this intensive period of self-reflection. The 18 months of invisible service had provided external validation of my reliability and discretion, but the isolation period had provided internal validation of my readiness for challenges and responsibilities that would test every aspect of my personal and professional development. The decision to accept or decline Sebastian's offer would represent not only a choice about immediate employment, but also a fundamental commitment about the type of person I intended to become and the kind of impact I wanted to have on the world. The isolation period had provided the clarity necessary for making that commitment, with full awareness of both the opportunities and obligations that would follow from whatever choice I ultimately made. The solitary reflection had transformed my perception of the surveillance and evaluation process, from violation to preparation for an opportunity that could provide the professional fulfillment and social impact that had motivated my original career aspiration. While the methods had been questionable, the purpose had been to identify individuals capable of contributing to work that aligned with principles of justice and accountability that formed the foundation of my personal and professional values. The isolation period concluded with recognition that the 18 months of invisible service had been necessary preparation for this moment of decision, providing the financial stability, professional experience, and personal growth that enabled serious consideration of an opportunity that would have been impossible to evaluate or accept under my previous circumstances. The devastating opening that had brought me to Blackwood Estate had ultimately led to possibilities that exceeded anything I could have imagined during the darkest periods of financial and professional uncertainty. The conclusion of my isolation period coincided with the arrival of an unexpected visitor, who would fundamentally alter my understanding of the investigative work Sebastian had proposed and provide crucial guidance regarding the decision that would shape my professional future. Catherine Marlowe arrived at Blackwood Estate on a crisp October morning, introduced by Sebastian as a former participant in similar investigative operations, who could provide perspective on the realities of corporate corruption investigations and the personal implications of accepting such responsibility. Marlowe appeared to be approximately 50 years old, with silver hair styled professionally and clothing that projected both academic credibility and practical experience.
Her manner conveyed intelligence, warmth, and a depth of experience that suggested she had navigated challenges similar to those I was currently facing. Most importantly, her presence provided the opportunity for candid discussion with someone who understood the investigative work from personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Sebastian explained that Dr. Marlowe had served as a research coordinator for corporate accountability investigations over a 7-year period before transitioning to her current role as director of a policy research institute focused on regulatory oversight and corporate governance. Her background included advanced degrees in economics and law, along with practical experience documenting financial fraud, environmental violations, and labor practices that had resulted in successful prosecutions and regulatory reforms. The invitation to speak with Dr. Marlowe represented Sebastian's recognition that my decision required input from someone who could address the practical and emotional realities of investigative work without the potential bias that might influence his own perspective as the person extending the opportunity. Her willingness to share her experiences openly provided invaluable insight into aspects of the work that could not be fully understood through theoretical description alone. Our initial conversation took place in the estate's sunroom, a comfortable space overlooking the forest that provided privacy while maintaining a relaxed atmosphere conducive to honest discussion. Marlowe began by acknowledging the difficulty of the decision I faced and sharing her own experience of accepting similar responsibilities, despite initial uncertainty about her qualifications and readiness for such challenging work. When I was first approached about participating in corporate investigations, I was working as an economics professor at a small liberal arts college, she began, her tone conveying understanding of the uncertainty I was experiencing. I had theoretical knowledge about financial systems and regulatory frameworks, but no practical experience with investigative work or the personal demands that such activities would require. Her background provided immediate reassurance that successful participation in the investigative operations did not require extensive prior experience in similar fields. The transition from academic work to active investigation had required significant learning and adaptation, but her academic foundation had provided valuable analytical skills that proved applicable to the new responsibility. The most important qualification is not technical expertise, which can be developed through training and experience. Dr. Marlowe continued, but rather personal integrity and emotional resilience, combined with genuine commitment to social justice principles. These qualities cannot be taught but must exist as fundamental aspects of character that enable sustained performance under pressure. Her emphasis on character and commitment, rather than technical qualifications, aligned with Sebastian's approach to participant selection and provided confidence. My background in social work and demonstrated resilience during financial hardship had provided relevant preparation for the investigative responsibilities. Marlowe proceeded to describe the specific nature of her investigative work, which had involved documenting pharmaceutical companies' manipulation of clinical trial data to conceal dangerous side effects from regulatory authorities and medical professionals. The investigations had required meticulous analysis of scientific documents, financial records, and internal communications that revealed systematic deception designed to protect corporate profits at the expense of patient safety. The work had ultimately contributed to legal settlements totaling several $1 billion and regulatory reforms that strengthened oversight of pharmaceutical research and development. More importantly, the investigations had prevented additional harm to patients by exposing dangerous practices before they could affect larger populations. The personal satisfaction that comes from contributing to meaningful systemic change provides motivation that sustains you through the difficult periods, she explained, her expression reflecting the deep fulfillment that had characterized her investigative career. When you know that your work has prevented harm to innocent people and held powerful institutions accountable for illegal behavior, the personal risks and professional challenges become more manageable. However, Marlowe also provided honest assessment of the significant personal costs associated with investigative work, including professional isolation, financial uncertainty during investigations, and ongoing stress related to potential retaliation from corporate targets. The psychological demands had required development of coping strategies and support systems that enabled sustained performance, despite the emotional burden of documenting human suffering caused by corporate misconduct. The most challenging aspect is not the technical complexity of the investigations, but rather the emotional impact of discovering the extent to which powerful individuals and organizations will harm others to protect their financial interests, she continued with notable seriousness. You must develop the ability to process this information professionally, while maintaining your psychological well-being and personal relations. Her candid acknowledgement of the emotional challenges provided important perspective on aspects of the work that Sebastian had mentioned only briefly during our initial discussion. The investigative activities would require not only analytical capabilities and professional discretion, but also emotional strength sufficient to handle regular exposure to evidence of serious harm inflicted on innocent people. Marlowe spent considerable time discussing the support systems and protective measures that had enabled her successful participation in high-risk investigations, while maintaining personal safety and professional security. The investigative operations involved sophisticated protocols for protecting participant identities, securing sensitive information, and minimizing exposure to retaliation from corporate targets. Sebastian's organization provides comprehensive support that extends far beyond financial compensation, she explained, describing security measures, legal protection, and professional development opportunities that were available to investigation participants. The support includes ongoing training, access to technical experts, and legal representation if corporate targets attempt intimidation or retaliation. The description of extensive support systems provided reassurance that participation in the investigative work would not require facing significant risks without appropriate protection and assistance. The organization had developed comprehensive capabilities for enabling effective investigation while minimizing personal vulnerability to corporate retaliation. Our discussion continued throughout the afternoon as Marlowe shared specific examples of investigations she had participated in and the impact those investigations had achieved in terms of legal accountability, regulatory reform, and prevention of additional harm to affected populations. The stories provided concrete evidence that the investigative work produced meaningful results, rather than simply generating information that remained unused or ineffective. One particularly compelling example involved her role in documenting environmental contamination by a manufacturing company that had been systematically violating water quality regulations while concealing the violations from regulatory authorities and affected communities. The investigation had required 18 months of meticulous research and documentation before sufficient evidence existed to support legal action and regulatory intervention. The company had been poisoning groundwater for over a decade while publicly claiming compliance with environmental regulations, Dr. Marlowe explained, her tone reflecting both anger at the deception and satisfaction with the ultimate outcome. Our investigation provided the evidence necessary for successful prosecution and a settlement that funded complete environmental remediation, plus healthcare for affected residents. The example demonstrated that individual investigations could produce significant positive outcomes that justified the personal risks and professional challenges associated with the work. The ability to contribute to such meaningful results provided powerful motivation for accepting the responsibilities, despite the inherent uncertainties and dangers. However, Marlowe also emphasized that successful participation required realistic expectations about timelines, outcomes, and personal limitations. Individual investigations often required years to complete, and many investigations failed to produce prosecutable evidence despite extensive effort and resource investment. The work demanded patience, persistence, and acceptance of uncertainty regarding ultimate results. You cannot measure success solely by legal outcomes or regulatory reforms, she advised, recognizing the importance of maintaining motivation during lengthy investigations with uncertain conclusions. The value lies also in the process of thorough documentation, the development of investigative capabilities, and the creation of information resources that may contribute to future accountability efforts. Her perspective on measuring success provided important guidance for maintaining motivation and professional satisfaction during investigations that might not produce immediate or visible results. The investigative work required commitment to the process and principles rather than dependence on specific outcomes for personal fulfillment. As our conversation progressed into the evening, Dr. Marlowe addressed questions about work-life balance, family relationships, and long-term career implications of participation in corporate corruption investigation. Her experience demonstrated that the investigative work could be integrated successfully with personal relationships and family responsibilities through careful planning and communication with family members about the nature and importance of the activity. The key is establishing clear boundaries between investigative work and personal life while ensuring that family members understand the significance of the work and the precautions that exist to protect their safety and welfare, she explained. Acknowledging the legitimate concerns about family security that had dominated much of my analysis during the isolation period, her advice about family communication provided practical guidance for addressing my concerns about potential risks to my mother and other family members. The investigative organization maintained extensive protocols for protecting family members and had successfully prevented retaliation against participants' relatives throughout their operational history. Marlowe concluded our conversation by addressing the decision-making process itself and the factors that should influence my ultimate choice about accepting Sebastian's offer. Her perspective emphasized the importance of authentic alignment between personal values and professional activities, rather than decisions based primarily on financial considerations or external expectations. The investigative work will challenge every aspect of your character, capabilities, and commitment, she said with the authority that came from years of direct experience. Success requires genuine passion for justice and accountability, combined with realistic assessment of your personal strengths and limitations. The decision should reflect who you truly are rather than who you think you should become. Her guidance provided the final piece of perspective necessary for completing my decision-making process. The weeks of isolation and analysis had provided intellectual understanding of the opportunity, but Dr. Marlowe's insights offered emotional and practical validation of the considerations that had shaped my evaluation of the investigative work. The conversation with Dr. Marlowe fundamentally altered my understanding of the investigative opportunity by providing concrete examples of meaningful impact achieved through similar work and demonstrating that successful participation was possible for individuals with backgrounds similar to my own. Her experience proved that academic and social service backgrounds could provide valuable preparation for investigative responsibilities, while confirming that the personal and professional challenges were manageable with appropriate support and preparation. Most importantly, Dr. Marlowe's obvious satisfaction with her career choice and continued commitment to corporate accountability work provided compelling evidence that the investigative activities could provide the type of professional fulfillment and social impact that had motivated my original interest in social work. Her career trajectory demonstrated that participation in corporate corruption investigations could serve as a foundation for long-term meaningful work rather than simply a temporary opportunity. The following morning, Marlowe departed Blackwood Estate after providing me with contact information for additional resources and offering ongoing availability for consultation if I decided to accept Sebastian's offer. Her willingness to maintain supportive contact provided additional reassurance that participation in the investigative work would include access to experienced mentors who understood the challenges and could provide guidance throughout the learning and adaptation process. The impact of Dr. Marlowe's visit extended beyond the specific information she had provided about investigative work to include validation of my analytical approach to the decision-making process and confirmation that my background background and character provided appropriate foundation for the responsibilities Sebastian had described.
Her recognition of the thoroughness of my evaluation process and her confidence in my potential effectiveness provided external validation that complemented my own assessment of readiness for the opportunity. The helper's arrival had provided exactly the guidance and perspective necessary for completing my decision about the investigative work. Marlowe's experience demonstrated that the opportunity aligned with my deepest professional values, while confirming that the challenges were manageable with appropriate preparation and support. Her insights had transformed my understanding of the work from theoretical possibility to practical reality that could provide meaningful impact while enabling professional growth and personal fulfillment. The combination of Dr. Marlowe's practical experience and Sebastian's comprehensive support systems created a foundation of confidence that had been missing during my initial evaluation of the opportunity. The realization that participation would include access to experienced mentors, extensive training, and comprehensive protective measures provided the final reassurance necessary for making a commitment to accept the expanded responsibilities. Most significantly, Dr. Marlowe's obvious passion for the investigative work and her continued commitment to corporate accountability demonstrated that the opportunity could provide the type of meaningful career that would justify the personal risks and professional challenges. Her example proved that individuals with academic backgrounds could contribute effectively to corporate corruption investigations while maintaining personal integrity and achieving significant positive impact. The commitment to accept Sebastian's offer for investigative work initiated my access to classified information systems that revealed the extraordinary scope and sophistication of the corporate accountability operations conducted from Blackwood Estate. Within hours of confirming my participation, Sebastian provided security clearances and access credentials that unlocked databases containing evidence of systematic corporate misconduct that extended far beyond anything I had previously imagined possible within legitimate business organizations. The revelation began with access to the secure digital archive that had originally led to my discovery of the surveillance systems. However, the expanded access revealed that my personnel file represented merely one component of an extensive intelligence operation that maintained comprehensive documentation on hundreds of corporations, thousands of executives, and decades of illegal activities that had escaped prosecution due to inadequate investigation and insufficient evidence compilation. Sebastian escorted me through the estate's Secure Operations Center, a sophisticated facility concealed beneath the main residence that housed advanced computing systems, communications equipment, and data storage capabilities that rivaled those of government intelligence agencies. The center operated continuously with rotating teams of analysts, researchers, and technical specialists who monitored corporate activities, analyzed financial transactions, and compiled evidence of potential misconduct for investigation and documentation. The scale of the operations challenged my understanding of what private organizations could accomplish through dedicated resources and systematic methodology. The facility contained workstations for financial analysis, legal research, communications, and evidence compilation that enabled comprehensive investigation of complex corporate structures and international business relationships that traditional regulatory agencies lacked the resources or authority to examine thoroughly. The fundamental truth that most people do not understand is that corporate corruption operates as a sophisticated system rather than isolated incidents. Sebastian explained while demonstrating the analytical capabilities available through the Operations Center. Individual cases of fraud or misconduct represent visible symptoms of systematic problems that require comprehensive investigation to identify, document, and address effectively. The explanation provided immediate insight into why traditional regulatory approaches often failed to achieve meaningful corporate accountability. Government agencies typically responded to specific complaints or violations without examining the broader patterns and relationships that enabled systematic misconduct to continue across multiple organizations and jurisdictions. The first investigation assignment provided concrete demonstration of these systematic patterns through analysis of pharmaceutical pricing manipulation that involved coordination between manufacturing companies, insurance providers and regulatory officials to maintain artificial price levels that generated excessive profits while restricting patient access to essential medication. The investigation revealed that pharmaceutical companies routinely delayed generic drug approvals through frivolous patent litigation, while simultaneously negotiating exclusive distribution agreements with insurance companies that eliminated competitive pricing pressure. The coordination involved systematic rotation of executives between pharmaceutical companies, insurance providers, and regulatory agencies that created conflicts of interest and enabled insider information sharing that facilitated continued manipulation. Most significantly, the investigation demonstrated that these practices were not limited to individual companies or specific medications, but represented systematic industry-wide coordination that had been operating for decades with full knowledge that the practices harmed patients and violated multiple federal regulations regarding competitive business practices and healthcare access. The evidence compilation process required analysis of financial records, internal communications, regulatory filings, and legal documents from dozens of organizations across multiple years of operation. The sophistication of the analytical tools and databases available through the Operations Center enabled identification of patterns and relationships that would have been impossible to detect through traditional investigation methods available to regulatory agencies or journalistic organizations. My role in the investigation involved researching specific pharmaceutical companies to identify instances where pricing decisions appeared to conflict with stated business justifications or regulatory requirements. The work required developing expertise in pharmaceutical economics, regulatory compliance requirements, and financial analysis techniques that enabled detection of suspicious patterns within complex organizational structure. The initial weeks of investigative work proved more intellectually challenging and professionally engaging than any previous employment experience. The combination of analytical complexity, social significance, and access to sophisticated investigative tools created a work environment that utilized my educational background and personal interests, while providing opportunities for substantial professional development and meaningful impact. However, the investigation also revealed disturbing information about the extent to which corporate misconduct had penetrated regulatory agencies and government institutions that were responsible for protecting public welfare. The evidence demonstrated that pharmaceutical pricing manipulation was facilitated by regulatory officials who possessed financial relationships with the companies they were responsible for overseeing, creating systematic conflicts of interest that undermined the effectiveness of government oversight. The discovery that government agencies charged with protecting public health had been compromised by corporate influence created profound disillusionment with institutional integrity that challenged my fundamental assumptions about democratic governance and regulatory effectiveness. The realization that systematic corruption extended into government institutions meant that traditional approaches to addressing corporate misconduct through regulatory complaints or political advocacy were likely to prove ineffective. Sebastian recognized the psychological impact of these discoveries and provided guidance regarding the emotional challenges associated with documenting systematic institutional failure. The most difficult aspect of this work is not the technical complexity, but rather accepting that institutions we trust to protect public welfare have been systematically compromised by corporate influence, he acknowledged during one of our regular briefing sessions. His perspective helped contextualize the emotional response to discovering evidence of widespread institutional corruption, while emphasizing that such discoveries made the investigative work more rather than less important for achieving meaningful accountability and systemic reform. The failure of traditional oversight mechanisms created greater necessity for independent investigation and documentation that could support legal action and public awareness campaigns. The investigation process also revealed the sophisticated methods that corporations employed to conceal illegal activities and avoid regulatory detection. Pharmaceutical companies utilized complex subsidiary structures, international financial transactions, and carefully coordinated communication protocols that made detection of coordinated pricing manipulation extremely difficult using conventional regulatory investigation techniques. The concealment methods included establishment of offshore subsidiaries that conducted pricing negotiations, while maintaining legal separation from parent companies. Utilization of consulting firms that facilitated communication between competitors without creating direct evidence of coordination. And systematic destruction of internal communications that might document an illegal coordination while maintaining sufficient records to satisfy basic regulatory compliance requirements. Most significant, the investigation revealed that corporate legal departments had developed comprehensive strategies for managing regulatory investigations that included preemptive litigation to delay information disclosure, strategic use of attorney-client privilege to protect internal communication, and coordination with regulatory officials to limit the scope and effectiveness of official investigations. These defensive strategies created substantial obstacles for traditional regulatory enforcement, while demonstrating why independent investigation organizations like Sebastian's operation were necessary for developing comprehensive evidence packages that could overcome corporate resistance to accountability efforts. The sophisticated legal defenses required equally sophisticated investigative approaches that government agencies often lacked the resources or political authorization to implement. The pharmaceutical pricing investigation consumed 3 months of intensive research and analysis before producing a comprehensive evidence package that documented systematic industry-wide coordination to manipulate pricing and restrict competition. The evidence included financial records, internal communications, regulatory filings, and legal documents that provided proof of illegal coordination between companies that competed directly in multiple pharmaceutical markets. The completed investigation demonstrated pricing manipulation that had cost consumers and government healthcare programs over $12 billion annually, while restricting access to essential medications for vulnerable populations including elderly patients, individuals with chronic conditions, and families with limited financial resources. The evidence showed that artificial price inflation had directly contributed to preventable hospitalizations, disease progression, and mortality among patients who could not afford necessary medication. The human impact of the pricing manipulation provided powerful motivation for ensuring that the investigation results were utilized effectively to achieve legal accountability and regulatory reform. The evidence demonstrated that corporate greed had directly caused suffering and death among innocent people who depended on access to affordable medications for survival and quality of life. Sebastian coordinated with investigative journalists, legal advocacy organizations, and regulatory officials to ensure that the evidence was disseminated effectively to achieve maximum impact in terms of legal prosecution, regulatory enforcement, and public awareness regarding the extent of pharmaceutical industry misconduct. The multi-pronged approach was designed to overcome corporate resistance and defensive strategies by creating simultaneous pressure from legal, regulatory, and public relations perspectives. The investigation results were provided to 3 major investigative journalism organizations that possessed the resources and expertise necessary for thorough independent verification and public reporting. The evidence was also shared with state attorneys general who possessed legal authority to pursue criminal prosecution and civil enforcement against companies that had violated state and federal regulations regarding competitive business practices and consumer protection. Most importantly, evidence was compiled into comprehensive regulatory filings that detailed specific violations of federal healthcare and business regulations, while providing recommendations for enforcement action and systemic reforms that could prevent future manipulation and restore competitive pricing to pharmaceutical markets. The impact of the investigation became apparent within weeks as media reports documenting pharmaceutical pricing manipulation generated significant public attention and political pressure for regulatory action. Congressional hearings were announced to examine pharmaceutical pricing practices, and multiple state attorneys general initiated legal investigations based on evidence provided through Sebastian's operation. The rapid response to the investigation results demonstrated the effectiveness of systematic evidence compilation and coordinated dissemination strategies for achieving meaningful accountability despite corporate resistance and defensive effort. The success provided validation
that independent investigation organizations could produce impact that exceeded what government agencies or traditional advocacy organizations could accomplish through conventional approach. However, the investigation also revealed the personal risks associated with challenging powerful corporate interests through comprehensive evidence compilation and public disclosure. Within days of the initial media reports, Sebastian received legal threats from pharmaceutical companies alleging defamation and demanding retraction of information that had been provided to journalists and regulatory officials. The legal intimidation efforts included demands for disclosure of information sources, threats of litigation for interference with business operations, and attempts to obtain court orders restricting further dissemination of investigation results. The corporate response demonstrated the significant resources and aggressive tactics that companies were willing to employ to protect their illegal activities from public scrutiny and legal accountability. Sebastian's experience with corporate retaliation enabled effective management of the intimidation efforts through legal representation, security protocols, and strategic communication that neutralized most threats while maintaining operational security for ongoing investigation. However, the retaliation attempts provided concrete demonstration of the risks that investigation participants faced when challenging powerful corporate interests. The pharmaceutical pricing investigation established my understanding of the systematic nature of corporate misconduct while demonstrating the potential for meaningful impact through comprehensive evidence compilation and strategic dissemination. The experience proved that independent investigation could achieve results that traditional regulatory and advocacy approaches often failed to accomplish despite similar resource investment and professional expertise. Most significantly, the investigation revealed that my background in social work and analytical capabilities, developed through academic study, provided valuable preparation for investigative responsibilities that I had initially considered beyond my qualification. The systematic approach to research, attention to human impact, and commitment to social justice that characterized social work training proved directly applicable to corporate accountability investigation. The success of the pharmaceutical pricing investigation created confidence in my ability to contribute effectively to similar investigations while demonstrating that the investigative work could provide the professional fulfillment and social impact that had motivated my original career interest. The combination of intellectual challenge, analytical sophistication, and meaningful social outcomes created a work environment that exceeded my expectations for professional satisfaction and personal growth. The first glimpse of truth regarding the systematic nature of corporate misconduct fundamentally altered my understanding of business operations, regulatory effectiveness, and the necessity for independent accountability efforts that operated outside traditional institutional frameworks. The revelation that systematic corruption extended throughout corporate and government institutions meant that meaningful reform required comprehensive investigation and evidence compilation, that government agencies often lacked the resources or political authorization to conduct. The pharmaceutical investigation provided proof that independent investigation organizations could achieve meaningful impact through systematic evidence compilation and strategic dissemination, while demonstrating that the personal and professional risks associated with such work were manageable. Appropriate security protocols and legal protection. The experience established foundation for continued participation in corporate accountability investigations that could provide ongoing opportunities for professional development and social impact. The transformation of my understanding from theoretical awareness of corporate misconduct to comprehensive knowledge of systematic corruption patterns created both greater appreciation for the complexity of accountability challenges and increased confidence in the potential for meaningful reform through dedicated investigation and evidence compilation efforts. The first glimpse of truth revealed that the investigative work aligned perfectly with my values and capabilities while providing opportunities for impact that exceeded anything available through traditional social services employment. The successful completion of the pharmaceutical pricing investigation generated recognition throughout Sebastian's network of investigative professionals and advocacy organizations, leading to invitations for collaboration with researchers, journalists, and legal experts who shared similar commitments to corporate accountability. This expansion of professional relationships marked the beginning of a support network that would prove essential for managing the complex personal and professional challenges associated with sustained investigative work targeting powerful corporate interests. The network formation process began when Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a financial crimes investigator with the Securities and Exchange Commission, contacted Sebastian, requesting consultation regarding methodologies for tracing complex international financial transactions that appeared designed to conceal illegal activities. Rodriguez had been following media reports regarding the pharmaceutical pricing investigation and recognized that Sebastian's organization possessed analytical capabilities that could enhance official regulatory investigations, constrained by jurisdictional limitations and resource restrictions. Sebastian arranged for Dr. Rodriguez to visit Blackwood Estate for comprehensive briefings regarding investigative techniques and evidence compilation strategies that had proven effective for documenting corporate misconduct across multiple jurisdictions and organizational structure. The collaboration represented an opportunity to support official regulatory enforcement while demonstrating the potential for productive cooperation between independent investigation organizations and government agencies committed to accountability. Rodriguez arrived at the estate accompanied by 2 additional SESC investigators specializing in complex financial fraud cases involving international corporate structure. Their professional backgrounds included advanced degrees in forensic accounting, extensive experience with white-collar criminal investigations, and particular expertise in analyzing offshore financial arrangements used to conceal illegal activities from regulatory detection. The initial briefing sessions revealed that government investigators faced significant institutional constraints that limited their ability to conduct comprehensive investigations of corporate misconduct involving multiple jurisdictions, extensive financial complexity, and sophisticated concealment strategies. Regulatory agencies operated under strict procedural requirements, limited budgets, and political pressures that often prevented thorough investigation of cases involving influential corporations with substantial lobbying capability. The most frustrating aspect of regulatory investigation is having strong suspicions about systematic misconduct but lacking the resources and authority necessary for comprehensive evidence compilation. Rodriguez explained during our first substantive discussion regarding the challenges faced by government investigators. We often identify patterns that suggest extensive illegal coordination, but our investigative scope is limited by jurisdictional boundaries and procedural constraints that corporations exploit to avoid accountability. Her perspective provided valuable insight into why independent investigation organizations, like Sebastian's operations, were necessary for achieving meaningful corporate accountability despite the existence of extensive regulatory agencies with official enforcement authority. The institutional limitations faced by government investigators created opportunities for sophisticated corporate misconduct to continue, despite regulatory awareness and concern. The collaboration between Sebastian's organization and the SESC investigators produced immediate benefits for both parties through information sharing and methodological consultation that enhanced the effectiveness of ongoing investigation. The government investigators gained access to analytical techniques and evidence compilation strategies that enabled more comprehensive investigation within their official capacity, while Sebastian's organization obtained valuable intelligence regarding regulatory priorities and enforcement strategies. Rodriguez introduced us to additional government investigators working on related cases involving systematic corporate misconduct across multiple industries and jurisdictions. These contacts included investigators from the Environmental Protection Agency examining corporate environmental crimes, Department of Justice prosecutors specializing in white-collar criminal cases, and state attorneys general pursuing civil enforcement actions against corporations that had violated consumer protection regulations. The expanding network of government contacts provided access to official information and regulatory intelligence that enhanced the effectiveness of independent investigations, while ensuring that evidence compilation aligned with enforcement priorities and legal requirements. The collaboration created synergistic relationships that multiplied the impact of both official and independent accountability efforts beyond government connections. The network expansion included relationships with investigative journalists from major news organizations who possessed expertise in corporate accountability reporting and established track records of successful investigative journalism that had achieved meaningful impact through public disclosure and awareness campaigns. These relationships provided essential outlets for investigation results while ensuring professional verification and editorial oversight that enhanced credibility and impact. Marcus Thompson, an investigative reporter with the Washington Herald, had spent 15 years documenting corporate environmental crimes and possessed extensive experience with complex investigations involving international corporations, offshore financial structures, and sophisticated concealment strategy. His professional reputation included multiple awards for investigative excellence and a demonstrated commitment to thorough fact-checking and verification that protected both news organizations and sources from legal retaliation. Marcus expressed particular interest in collaborating on investigations involving environmental crime because his previous reporting had revealed systematic patterns of corporate environmental violations that appeared to involve coordination between companies, regulatory officials, and political representatives. The patterns suggested systematic corruption that extended beyond individual cases to include industry-wide coordination, designed to minimize regulatory enforcement and avoid meaningful accountability for environmental damage. Environmental crime represents one of the most underreported categories of corporate misconduct because the complexity of scientific evidence and regulatory frameworks makes it difficult for general audiences to understand the significance of violation. Marcus explained during our initial consultation regarding potential collaboration opportunities. However, environmental crimes often cause the most extensive and lasting harm to public health and community welfare, making them critically important targets for investigative reporting. His perspective emphasized the importance of environmental crime investigation while highlighting the challenges associated with communicating complex technical information to public audiences in ways that generated appropriate concern and political pressure for enforcement action. The collaboration would require developing communication strategies that made technical evidence accessible without oversimplifying the complexity of environmental regulatory violations. The network expansion also included connections with legal advocacy organizations that specialized in corporate accountability litigation and possessed expertise in challenging corporate misconduct through civil lawsuits, regulatory enforcement actions, and legislative advocacy. These organizations provided essential legal expertise while offering channels for converting investigation results into concrete legal action that could achieve meaningful accountability and compensation for affected parties. Jennifer Chen, senior litigation attorney with the Corporate Accountability Legal Foundation, had dedicated her career to pursuing civil lawsuits against corporations that had harmed consumers, workers, and communities through illegal activities or negligent business practices. Her legal expertise included complex class action, litigation, regulatory enforcement support, and legislative advocacy that had achieved significant settlements and regulatory reforms across multiple industries. Jennifer's organization, possessed extensive experience with cases involving corporate environmental crimes, financial fraud, product safety violations, and labor law violations that had resulted in substantial financial settlements and meaningful regulatory reform. The legal advocacy approach provided essential complement to investigation and reporting by creating concrete legal consequences for corporate misconduct and establishing precedents that deterred similar violations by other corporations. Successful corporate accountability requires coordination between investigation, reporting, and legal action that creates multiple pressure points for achieving meaningful change, Jennifer explained during our first collaboration planning session. Investigation provides evidence, reporting creates public awareness and political pressure, and legal action establishes concrete consequences and financial incentives for compliance with regulations. The multidisciplinary approach emphasized the importance of network coordination, maximizing the impact of accountability efforts while ensuring that investigation results were utilized effectively to achieve tangible outcomes, rather than simply generating information that remained without practical consequence. The support network formation process required developing secure communication protocols and information sharing procedures that protected sensitive evidence while enabling effective collaboration among participants with different professional requirements and security constraints. Government investigators operated under strict confidentiality requirements, journalists needed to protect source information, and legal advocates required evidence handling procedures that maintained admissibility for potential litigation.
Sebastian's organization provided sophisticated, secure communication systems that enabled encrypted information sharing, protected file storage, and coordination of collaborative activities while maintaining operational security for all network participants. The technical infrastructure supporting network operations rivaled capabilities available to government intelligence agencies, while providing flexibility and accessibility to productive collaboration among diverse professional backgrounds. The network coordination also required establishing clear protocols regarding information attribution, source protection, and evidence sharing that respected the professional requirements and ethical obligations of all participants, while maximizing the effectiveness of collaborative investigations. These protocols balanced transparency and accountability with security considerations that protected both investigation integrity and participant safety. Regular network meetings were established to coordinate ongoing investigation, share intelligence regarding emerging patterns of corporate misconduct, and develop strategic approaches for addressing systematic accountability challenges that required coordinated response across multiple professional disciplines and institutional capabilities. The meetings provided opportunities for professional development, methodological consultation, and mutual support that enhanced the effectiveness of individual investigations while strengthening the overall network capacity. The first collaborative investigation undertaken by the expanded network involved examination of systematic environmental regulatory violations by petrochemical companies operating along the Gulf Coast region. The investigation required coordination between financial analysis of corporate structures, scientific evaluation of environmental monitoring data, legal research regarding regulatory requirements, and journalistic investigation of community health impact. My role in the collaborative investigation involved analyzing corporate financial records to identify patterns of environmental compliance spending that appeared inconsistent with stated environmental protection commitments and regulatory requirements. The financial analysis required developing expertise in environmental compliance cost estimation, regulatory penalty assessments, and capital investment patterns that could indicate systematic efforts to minimize environmental protection expenditure. The investigation revealed that petrochemical companies had systematically underinvested in environmental protection infrastructure while maintaining public commitments to environmental stewardship and regulatory compliance. The companies had calculated that regulatory penalties for environmental violations cost significantly less than comprehensive compliance investments, creating financial incentives for systematic regulatory violation. The collaborative investigation demonstrated the enhanced capability and impact that resulted from network coordination among professionals with complementary expertise and institutional access. The financial analysis provided quantitative evidence of systematic non-compliant scientific evaluation documented environmental and health impacts, legal research identified specific regulatory violations, and journalistic investigation revealed community effects that demonstrated the human consequences of corporate environmental crime. The network approach enabled comprehensive investigation that none of the individual participants could have accomplished independently, while providing multiple channels for dissemination and impact that maximized accountability outcomes. The collaboration proved that professional network formation could multiply individual capabilities while creating synergistic effects that enhanced both investigation quality and practical impact. The success of the collaborative environmental investigation established the network as an effective mechanism for addressing complex corporate accountability challenges that required diverse expertise and coordinated action across multiple professional disciplines. The relationships formed through the collaboration provided foundation for ongoing cooperation and mutual support that enhanced the professional development and investigative effectiveness of all network participants. Most significant, the network formation process demonstrated that meaningful corporate accountability required collective action rather than individual effort, and that professional relationships based on shared values and complementary capabilities could achieve impact that exceeded the sum of individual contributions. The support network provided both practical resources and emotional sustenance that enabled sustained commitment to challenging and potentially dangerous investigative work. The network relationships also provided opportunities for professional mentorship and skill development that enhanced my capabilities as an investigative analyst, while creating connections that would support long-term career development in corporate accountability work. The exposure to diverse professional perspectives and methodological approaches expanded my understanding of investigation techniques, while providing models for career advancement within the accountability field. The support network formation marked a fundamental transition from individual professional development to collaborative professional identity that embedded my work within a larger community of professionals committed to similar values and objectives. The relationships provided both practical support for current investigations and foundation for long-term professional growth within the corporate accountability community. The network connections demonstrated that expertise and influence could be developed through relationships and collaboration rather than solely through individual achievement, and that meaningful social impact often resulted from collective action rather than individual heroism. The support network provided proof that complex social problems required sophisticated collective responses that leverage diverse capabilities and institutional access. The formation of the professional support network established the foundation for sustained effectiveness in corporate accountability investigations, while providing the relationships and resources necessary for managing the personal and professional challenges associated with challenging powerful corporate interests. The network represented both practical infrastructure and emotional community that enabled long-term commitment to investigative work that aligned with my deepest professional values and social justice aspirations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.